I think we're good, Lawrence.
Okay, I'm just waiting for the 10:30. Well, it's now 10:30 and it's time for brainstorming the human connection. We are brought to you by the South Dakota Humanities Council. I want to remind you that this is an interactive program. And what that means is that the program is really aimed at having a conversation more than two people talking at you. We want to have a conversation. So while we're talking and giving you some background information about what our conversation is about today, I'd like to encourage you to write down, jot down questions, comments, reactions, so that we can have a conversation and we can all get used to having conversations about topics that we are conflicted about, don't know how to think about quite. But this is a good chance to practice how to have a conversation about things that you don't know about or that you feel really passionate about, and other people feel like, well, no, I don't think that. Well, this is, we hope, we try to make it a safe place to have such kind of conversations. Today, we're having a conversation with Peter Strong, who is the co-founder of Racing Magpie. And he's going to tell you all about Racing Magpie. But first, let's learn about Peter. Welcome, Peter. There you go.
Thanks so much, Lawrence. Really great to be here. Good to see everybody in the background too.
Can you tell us a little bit about you, Peter? Like, where'd you come from? Where were you born? How did you get to the elevator speech of how do you got from the womb to where you are now?
Yeah, I'll give you the fastest version I can. I was actually born in a small town in Ohio, and from the time I was a teenager, I've been interested in museum work, and I've learned now that it's that idea of informal learning. So I actually went from Ohio. I went to undergrad at Marshall University in West Virginia for history. And then I moved to Washington, D.C. and got a master's degree in museum studies and was able to intern at the Holocaust Museum and was an assistant curator there at the Women's Memorial Museum. And then I made a quick move to Oklahoma for about a year and a half, where I worked for the anthropology department at the university there. And I was ready to get back into museum work. And so I put out a national search, and I was hired to become the director at the Heritage Center at Red Cloud Indian School on the Pine Ridge Reservation here in South Dakota. That was in 2005. That number keeps getting further and further away, almost 20 years now. And after 8 years leading that organization or that department of Red Cloud, I went to become the first vice president of operations and programs at First Peoples Fund, supporting Native artists across the country. And then after 2 years there, my partner Mary Bordeaux and I realized, there's so much that's happening across the country, and it's not really happening here in Rapid City or in Western South Dakota. And we wanted to put our efforts where our hearts were, to say it. So we created Racing Magpie. My partner and I are co-directors of Racing Magpie, and we have two sons. We have a 25-year-old who lives in Santa Fe, and he's a museum preparator. And we have a 13-year-old who's just started his 8th grade year.
Okay. Is he doing museums already too?
He's doing art, not yet museums.
Well, he's on his way. He's on the right track for it. Let's
I
talk
think so.
about let's talk about Racing Magpie a little bit. Tell us about that. What is its 50,000-foot elevator speech?
Well, you know, Racing Magpie has a very broad scope. We're here to support Native artists and community in the work that they do. And the way that that's manifested itself, we began as we realized there was a need in Rapid City for a gallery, an arts gallery that wasn't tied to the market and tied to the tourism industry. We were just like, there was a place, we needed a place where Native artists could actually follow their creativity. And my partner Mary is a curator, so we were like, this is a perfect way to get started. When we floated that idea to the community, immediately there was a huge we found out there was a huge need with artists for affordable studio space and for a location that was comfortable for Native artists and Native community to come together and be in the same space. So that's where we began in 2015, was with those pieces. We had affordable studios, we had a Native gallery, and shared community creative space, and it's grown since then.
Okay. You mentioned supporting artists. That's a big challenge. What do you mean by supporting Native artists? What do you do?
Well, I think artists in general, they're, after being in South Dakota for 15 years, 18 years now, it seemed to us that there was a lot of support at the finished end, the finished product. You know, once you have a piece, there were galleries that would be happy to sell it. There were places like the Doll Art Center and others across the state who would display it, but there just weren't people to provide, there wasn't much support for Native artists for the creative space, for the process. You know, what is the process, the creative flow, all those intangible things that are, you know, even when you ask the question, it's hard to summarize them. But affordable studio space, the ability to come together in a safe place like this and have discussions about the creation of art, a technique, the impact of colonization on the Lakota art continuum, all these really important conversations. There just weren't places for that. So that's what we've tried to foster through exhibition space, through classes, through online resources, through partnering with other organizations to make sure that Native artists have better access to markets, to supplies, to all of the things that they need to do.
Strongly disagrees with the
Can
decision.
you, I think somebody's mic is on or something. You mentioned the space. Do you have some pictures that you could show us of what those spaces look like when you talk about space? That'll give us a better idea.
I do. We actually, and speaking of space, you know, we spent our first 5 years renting space in downtown Rapid City at the old AB's Feed and Seed building. And just as the pandemic hit in 2020, we ended our lease, and we were able in 2021 to purchase new space. So you're going to see some images here from both locations. I just have, hopefully everyone can see these images. Just this is our gallery. We were doing some community programming in 2022. This is our old gallery. We have the Lakota Sewing Circle that comes almost every 2 weeks, and they've been coming for 7 years just to share space and learn from each other and laugh and have lunch. And learn. There's some Lakota language sharing that happens there. There's a far shot of the gallery. This is a beautiful mural by Pejuta Press, which is Mike Tubols, Doug Tubols, and Reed Tubols did this with a grant from the South Dakota Arts Council. A beautiful mural in our parking lot. And there's Mike with another project we supported him on. That's at the Lemon Avenue Community Garden. We've helped support with setting up and hosting different art markets, so artists could come in and have a place to sell their work as well. This is one of the art studios. This is Dwayne Wilcox's studio. Dwayne is a South Dakota, he's received the South Dakota Governor's Award in the Arts, and he's a painter and a ledger artist. So that's his studio. John Gozen Center is a jeweler and a scholar as well, and this is his studio to create jewelry. And I'll just roll through these if you have more questions or anything. Once.
Yeah. So I can see space, I can see tables, I can see chairs. Those are things. Can you talk about any other equipment that you can give people access to that they might not have, or maybe not able to even afford or whatever? What other kind of things do you do make accessible other than the physical space? Not to belittle that, but
yeah, that's a good point. From the beginning, we looked at all the different models of supporting artists, co-ops, and maker spaces, and that type of thing. And we came from this place, this Lakota perspective of always trying to be a good relative or be in good relationship with people, and putting the emphasis on relationship from day one, or at the base of everything we do. So to your question, we have a whole huge cabinet full of equipment, of tools, of supplies that everyone who comes in the space has access to, so that they don't have to purchase items. We have plans in the future to start, if we can expand into our second building, to come up with a community printing studio. This idea of let's let our nonprofit figure out a way to find the equipment that the artists need and get them trained, and then they have access to those things collectively. Another small program we started is we had a couple folks donate large collections of beading supplies or art supplies, and rather than us hold on to those for some possible future class, we actually created something called the supply swap, which is just in that idea of being in good relationship and reciprocity. All of those things are available for free to the community. They can come in and take items if they need to just get that next keychain made or that next masterpiece made. And then as they finish projects, they can bring supplies and share them back to the community.
Right. Interesting. I'm going to ask if any of let's take a few more. Hold that picture. Can you go back? So in this picture, it looks like you're doing some recording. Is that part of something you do as well?
Well, this is actually one of the ways that we think we've been told that the work we do and the space we provide is valuable. This is two separate artists. The one sitting with his back to us is a musician, and he was doing some recordings and working on an album. The artist on the right is Dwayne Wilcox, who I mentioned earlier, who kind of plays guitar on the side. And so there was just the space for them to come together, bounce ideas off of each other, learn. Dwayne doesn't have much experience with computer, mixing and recording. So it was that space where they could learn, they could have that real time sharing and learning. without the pressure of, we only have a 1 hour class. It's very much on their own schedule.
Sure. All right. So but is any recording happening there, or is this just he brought his computer in and then after that he left?
Well, he actually has a studio at Racing Magpie. So part of the space that he shares with us, he's turned into this really cool recording room. He's got, sound dampening on the walls, and he does the work of bringing in other bands that he knows and really sharing the space with other folks to do the work.
Okay.
And then we as an organization start, as things happen, we're like, how can we support this kind of work? Is there a way that we could in our next iteration of the space, could we come up with some grant funding to buy more equipment and take the work, just support the work that Mike is doing or other artists are doing? So we do have those things in mind for the future.
Okay, good. Okay, can you keep rolling through so what were you going pretty fast there, Bless?
Sorry. Well, I have a separate group of images. These are close-ups from an exhibit that's currently on display in the gallery at Racing Magpie. These are the three artists that put it together. That's Mary Bordeaux on the right, Laylee Long Soldier in the middle, who's an amazing poet and visual artist, and Clementine Bordeaux, who's a documentary filmmaker and artist. And they put together an exhibit called Responsibilities and Obligations, Understanding Mitakuye Oyasin. And it's this really deep dive into understanding a Lakota phrase of Mitakuye Oyasin, which has been kind of popularly co-opted to be translated as "we're all related." And they realize that it's a much deeper and more important concept within the Lakota culture. So they went out and interviewed like 7 or 8 Lakota women and did these interviews with them. Laylee then wrote poetry based on those interviews, and they created, and then there were videos inside of sculpture, so you could actually hear the words of the interviewees talking about the importance of this Lakota concept. And that's the kind of exhibits we're looking to continue to do in the future, really creating space for Lakota and other Native artists to explore culture, explore art, go deeper into their own voices and their own ways of expressing those things.
You mentioned that you guys did some poetry as a result, an extension of one of these programs. Did you do was the poetry in English or LDN?
Yeah, the poetry that Laylee wrote, you can see she actually incorporated her poetry onto the 2 stars in the background of this photo. The black star on the right, each diamond of this star quilt design has a word or phrase cut out of it. It's paper and it has the words cut out of it, and each diamond is a poem. So there are 8 poems in the star. And then the star on the left is found poetry based on the work of a really amazing Dakota artist and scholar from the late 1800s and early 1900s called Zitkala Shah. So it was found poetry based on some essays that she wrote.
But were they in English or Lakota?
And they're in English, pardon me. Yeah.
They're in English. Okay. So well, anyway, let's talk later about the potential for doing something, poetry in one or all of the native languages, because it has a place, and I think one of the reasons it has a special place is because people want to revive the language now. And one of the ways to get people actually to speak the language is to learn to dance with it. know, instead of just doing drills and then repeating things in drills, which this sort of like learning languages like math or history kind of doesn't work. But if you can like feel the language and speak the language from thought, as opposed to having to translate it in your mind and translate the grammar, etc., it really enhances the actual speaking of the language. And I find that poetry is one way to really get to know a language, especially if you're writing it, because you have to think, well, what's the meaning in that language? You know, not what can I say in English now? Let me like substitute some Lakota words for it, which usually, you know, languages really aren't translatable, you know, really when you get down to it. They're approximatable, but they're not translatable. So I think I'm anxious to see if we can get something going like that, and maybe that's a collaboration that we can work on. I actually did try to get that started. So, and there's a YouTube video with some people actually doing it already, so, as an example. So it just, every time I get a chance, I try to push that idea, because I just think, you know, that's a missing link here, you know, and something that could be taken advantage of. It's a resource.
That's a great idea. You know, we've got so many possible projects percolating. One, I would encourage you. We have another program called Winter Camp that is basically a virtual it's a virtual platform for Lakota people to come and share their knowledge with everyone. And one of the sessions was actually Laylee Long Soldier and her aunt Tilda St. Pierre, and they did a co-workshop about writing poetry in Lakota. So it was the first section was, the first week was talking about poetry and talking about the language, and Tilda actually doing some lessons about the conceptual nature of Lakota language. And the second week was a real deep workshop of people writing and sharing poetry. So we've got maybe a seed planted there that we can add to what you're talking about, Lawrence. That would be great.
Well, if you go on YouTube and put in Lakota poetry and my name, you'll see that the documentary, and there are a lot of poems. And Ben Black Bear was one of the people who worked with that.
Wonderful.
Well, he was one of the people who did the poems, and it can be something to boost that idea, because I think if we can introduce it to schools and have kids start to write the poetry in the schools, it gives a whole different ownership of the language to people, when they can say, look, you know, like, we can do this, you know, and we can, now it makes it memorable too, you know. I think when, you know, I don't want to get too deep into that because it's not what the program's about, but I think it's an, you know, it's whatever, you know, we can do to encourage the language speaking. I figure, okay, well, let's do that, you know. I want to open it up now to the rest of our esteemed guests who are here to ask questions, comments, reflections, you know, whatever. This is a conversation.
Okay, I'll go ahead. And
Go ahead.
Peter, I have a question for you. When I was looking at the Racing Magpie website, one of the items on there is something called the CCLI, the Creative Community Leadership Institute. And I wondered if you could share a little bit about that so we can know more about what that is.
Sure. You know, the CCLI program has been around a long time. It's a program that was hosted in the Twin Cities quite a bit. It had just started reaching Western South Dakota. There had been one cohort that had happened in Rapid City, but essentially it was an attempt, or it is an attempt. We're trying to center or help train people or get people open to the idea of centering art and creative expression in problem solving in communities as well. There's a long track record of artists and the creative community being left out of community planning. Those tend to be kind of covered by folks in more hard sciences, and it's a leadership program that's really intended to get people to think about systems, think about problem solving, and opening up the doors to centering artists, the people, and the creatives problem solving in real ways that can affect the community and any community, from a small community to a region, in really positive ways. So in 2019, I think there was an open call for folks, an organization, to take over running that program. And we Racing Magpie really see that outcome. If we would see artists and culture bearers centered in decision making and planning as being a huge positive in the region. So we partnered with Springboard for the Arts in the Twin Cities to lead this program for the last, it's turned into 4 years with the pandemic. It was intended to be a 3-year process, but we've had cohorts of folks in different parts of the 3-state region, North and South Dakota and Minnesota, going through these programs and learning about those processes and thinking about how can we center creativity in problem solving. And hopefully those folks will continue to work together and go out and do more work. That's the best nutshell I could come up with, sorry.
Well,
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, sure. Anyone else have questions or comments? Well, while they're thinking, I'm a white space phobic, so I like to keep things going. Let's talk about the winter camp program. You mentioned it. What is that about, and what are its goals? What has it accomplished?
Well, this is another program that the community has come to us as individuals, Mary and me, and as to us as an organization with ideas and thoughts over like a 10-year period. I had a couple elders talk to me when I worked for Red Cloud, back in the 2010s. But this idea of winter historically in Lakota community here on the plains was a time when various Tioshbai or small family groups would come together to make a winter camp and survive and support each other for the winter, for the harsh winters that we have. And that was a time of, and again, this is my interpretation as a non-native person, learning as I go, but this was a time when Lakota people would share. They'd be sharing and supporting each other and building each other up, sharing tips and tricks, and where were the buffalo this year? What are new techniques for art or creation? Maybe even people changing, like someone getting married into a new family. But they were times of stepping back and supporting each other and strengthening each other. So these elders were like, just said, what would that look like now after 120, 140 years of reservation and colonial impacts on the culture, and then all the technological advances that have happened? How could we do that, but do it today? And when the pandemic hit, it just triggered with me that we need to just jump in and create a platform for sharing around this idea of winter camp. And so the last 3 winters, we've had guests from the community come in, talk either for a 1-hour period or maybe multiple times about anything that they've built up a knowledge about and want to share back to community. So it ranges from, we started off with our heavy hitters and the esteemed Joseph Marshall III did a couple really brilliant, like long lectures about leadership and Lakota leadership and community and the importance of the arts and culture. And then we've had folks do everything from talking about singing in the powwow circuit, what do songs mean, to the poetry workshop that we talked about. It's just been this amazing collection of Lakota brilliance that we've just been trying to I don't want to say capture, that has too many connotations, but just create a space for those things to be there so that it's a resource for anyone to come and learn about. So they're archived on our Facebook videos page, and we have a YouTube channel where they're all open to folks to come and learn. And, you know, much like what we're doing here today, like we have to listen and we have to hear people in different ways in order to continue to learn and grow.
Okay. You mentioned in our conversations earlier that you're somehow connected with the Waters Group. Can you talk about them and then what your connection is with them?
Yeah, I'm full of nutshells today. So in a nutshell, the Waters is an organization it's a gathering of different individuals from across the 3-state region who were given a task to figure out a more equitable and less harmful and more values-based way to distribute funds around the region. Back in 2019, Art Place America, which was a national 10-year initiative, was sunsetting, and they had $3 million that was designated for what they called the Upper Midwest Assembly region, which is the 3 states, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, and the 23 Native nations that share the geography. And they selected 20 individuals from across the 3 states who are either practicing artists or folks in the arts world to come together and design a way to distribute those funds in the way that was best for our region. And Mary and I were both invited to be part of that original 20. And then out of that group designated 7 of us, myself included, to be the waterers. And the idea was watering the creativity that's happening in the community, specifically for BIPOC individuals and BIPOC-led organizations, so Black, Indigenous, people of color across the region. So we were able to distribute $3 million directly to BIPOC individuals and organizations between 2020 and 2021. And we put out like a call to action to philanthropy to say, you all need to do this. You need to give money in a less harmful way. We have the shorthand is to scrap the app, get rid of the application process. Those are for individual artists and BIPOC folks. Or people who are just doing the work. That can be really harmful. Change the idea of reporting for people so that we aren't writing reports, but that it's relationship based. So
I always found that whole application thing, I understand why they have it, and I can give some really good case histories why it actually supports things that should be done. But on the other hand, the people who are artists, they're not bean counters. The good ones are not bean counters. When they are successful economically, it's usually because someone else who is a bean counter takes care of that out in front for them. So if there's somebody who can say, hey, look, like, you do the work, tell us what you want to do, tell us what you're trying to accomplish, show us how it helps somebody else, or whatever those criteria are, and let us worry about the money. You do the work, and based on how we evaluate the work, based on what you said you were trying to do, then then we're all good. I was part of a program like that in Sioux Falls, and it didn't quite get to no app, but it was like a 1-page 5-question app, you know, where you get it. It's like, what are you going to do? How much do you need? And do you know anybody else who will vouch for you? You know, because we don't know you, but do you know anybody else who will vouch for it? It's kind of like the Grameen Bank, there, you know, where they loan you money. If you can find 10 people who say this is a good person, and they'll pay you back. If you find those 10 people who will put some skin in the game and say that, you get the loan. You know, and so to me, it was kind of a takeoff on that kind of trust. You know, if you know, so I appreciate that kind of effort. I'd like to turn a little bit now back to supporting artists and talk about the support that's underneath the material supports, underneath the kinds of things like buildings and supplies and equipment. My observation is artists' biggest deficit are kind of emotional, spiritual, those kind of supports. Are you guys looking at taking care of that, or is that out of your wheelhouse, or how do you feel about that?
Well, I agree. First of all, I agree with you very much. I think that those pieces are left out of a lot of equations that are out there right now, and institutional support just leaves that out. I also like to say that Mary and I are both museum and arts people. We don't pretend to be counselors or professionals, healthcare professionals in that way. But saying that, we are community members, right? We are humans. We are part of our community, and we really care for people beyond just transactional methods. So we are trying to figure out, how do we, again, kind of amplify the community connections and familial connections that are in community? How do we offer positive support if there are needs for other professionals to come in? We're trying to figure out ways to partner with folks to think about health and wellness. During the pandemic, we did a short, I think we did 2 different programs that were like virtual residencies, and those included time to just sit down and be together in a virtual setting and have human interaction while we're making art. You know, like just this idea of creating space to support us as people and support the beyond the physical as well. And I reached the end of my vocabulary when it comes to that, but I do know that the spaces that we create and bringing the right people with good hearts and good intentions together and centering that around art and safe spaces has really just the artists that have been parts of those things have told us that it's been invaluable to them, and that, you know, that whether they were thinking of leaving the arts world or having really difficult times emotionally, that these things start supporting them to be in a more positive place as well.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things I saw you were doing is bringing people together. Can you talk about some of the connections that have been made and how those connections have impacted those who have been impacted?
I mean, it's hard to sum those up. I mean, we run the gamut from small, relatively small connections. So one artist connecting with another artist and just having those inspirations, right? Those moments of an artist who just needed a little bit of discussion and feedback and safe conversation that they weren't getting anywhere else, that inspired them to go to the next level. There are connections, you know, we do everything we can to offer, to do letters of support and bringing programs that may never have interacted with Native artists to Pine Ridge or to Rapid City or to Cheyenne River, and trying to open their eyes to say, you're missing all these incredible people. And here are some thoughts on why, like we said, applications and different things like that. And then, there have been artists who've gone through our programs that end up, and we don't take credit for it, but I think because they have some support and space and a network of people supporting them, they're able to move forward in their artistic career and get fellowships and get into large art markets and get into galleries and do some of those things that help their career and help their growth as artists as well.
Do you guys run interference for them and those kind of, like getting grants or getting into galleries? Do you just hand them a how-to book or send them to a motivational speech? How do you work that?
We stay pretty organic. We keep an open door to any Native artist who wants to come and ask questions and have a discussion and ask, we have a conversation and figure out ways that we can support them. And when we do get the questions, there have been times when we've helped people write a grant, or we've made an introduction or sent some artwork to a gallery and said, have you seen this person? We haven't systematized that yet, and we're not sure we need to, because it really is about that personal touch and that shared community. And that way it's much more open to everyone, and we can continue to open it up and not feel like a closed group or a club, that we're not being cliquey, that it is open to anyone. And it's been everything from doing a workshop on how to take better pictures of your artwork. We went up to Forband's CDFI in Cheyenne River at Eagle Butte, and we were like, you can make a photo box with a cardboard box, some tissue paper, and a $2 clamp shop light from Walmart. For less than $10, you can make a really nice light box and use your cell phone to take a really nice picture that you can send in to help you get into an art show or something like that. To like helping brainstorm how to get an artist to take their idea and like put it in the language of a funder as well. We've done all of those things, and we love just seeing people succeed that way.
Yes. Have you worked with Arts South Dakota at all?
Yeah, over the years we've done some work with them and with the Arts Council. We just completed early this year. We did a year of just reaching out and providing support to arts organizations across the state to do a better job at engaging with BIPOC audience and BIPOC artists. So we were able to do a project, and that was kind of in partnership with both and Arts Midwest. And again, just trying to take the things that we've learned and go out and be a sounding board and be a support to groups across the state and wherever we're asked to support them.
I want to open it up again to our esteemed guests and participants, co-conspirators, some would say. If you have any questions, comments, anecdotes, Anne, go ahead, Anne.
I came in late, so you might have already said it. But several years ago, before the pandemic, you had a program open to the whole community, like non-Indigenous people like me. And I think it was centered about Little Bighorn. And there were people there telling stories that they'd heard from their grandparents. And there were people there I met who were related to my Lakota teacher, who wasn't very proud of me. But anyway, it was a real good feeling of community that I felt invited. And there was food and friendship and different kinds of connections and storytelling. And I'm a member of the Black Hills Storytellers. And we used to have a couple of Lakota people long ago in our group, and we miss that now. But we'd be in meetings together, and sometimes we'd go down to Pine Ridge and join in storytelling activities. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. And I'd like to come back if you ever do something like that again. And I know Joyce Jefferson is on the list of listeners. She's a great storyteller. And I know you've had Jace DeCory. And
Yes.
I also knew Wilmer Mestiff and Calvin Jumping Bull and miss them very much. And whenever you're ready to invite non-Indigenous people to join in stuff like this, I would like to come. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm- Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm really glad to hear that you were at our programs. And I do want to just say that anytime we have public programs, even if it's centered in Lakota community, part of being Lakota that I've learned as a white guy is that the Lakota community is very welcoming and very open. And so our programs have that same as well. So I hope you feel, if you follow us on social media and you see a public event, I hope you can come and join. And I want you to feel welcome to come as well. And come see our new space as well.
Yeah, I'd like to.
Mhm. And hi, Joyce.
Anybody else have questions, comments?
Yeah, I'll throw out another one. So Peter, you had mentioned earlier when you were introducing yourself that you were part of the first People's Fund organization, or are part of that, I guess. And I noticed that just within, I think this past May, if I remember correctly, they had a grand opening, if you will, for the place there on the reservation known as the Oglala Lakota Art Space. And I'm wondering, do you have any connection with them? Do you do work with them specifically, or the people of Racing Magpie? Is there some collaboration among those different organizations or spaces?
Yeah. So First People's Fund is a great organization. And like I said, they provide support to Native artists and communities around the country. But yeah, we're in this kind of exciting moment, I think, in South Dakota. As much as I talk about there's so much need in the art world, there's some really great things happening. And the Oglala Lakota Art Space is one of those. It's located just outside of Kyle in the north, kind of the northeast central part of the reservation. And it's a beautiful space with artist studios, community space, classrooms. They have a rolling res arts bus that takes their programming out into the community. As we've had their art bus come and do programming at Racing Magpie in Rapid City to reach the community in Rapid City. They've hosted different trainings and things at our space. And, you know, with them just opening, I think there's so much possibility and thinking about these locations so that people in the communities don't have to go as far. They don't have to travel from Pine Ridge to Sioux Falls or even to Rapid City. They can stay in their own community and have those resources there as well. And it just builds this network of really amazing arts groups and organizations that's small but mighty already. And maybe we can go towards mighty but mighty in the future. Yeah, that's a good question. That's another great place to learn about.
Thank you.
And speaking about those kind of opportunities, I'd like to talk a little bit about your new buildings. You alluded to that, but I'd like to first look at, have you guys ever thought about or have plans for something relative to a maker space? You know, are you familiar with that concept?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I'll say what it is for those who are not. A maker space is where you have a room and you develop a community around equipment that is shared, shared space, shared equipment, and you create a community that is willing to share their techniques in using it. So you might have like some places that are makerspace have only hand tools, so they don't miss as many fingers. And then some have power tools, and then you get to learn how to use tools that you probably you've maybe never seen, can't afford, but you can learn how to make things and use that to manipulate different materials. And when I've been part of maker spaces, we often have people who have they're familiar with different materials, and they will come in and give a short seminar or something like that on how to use certain kind of vacuum plastics and stuff like that. That takes whatever art you're doing, it gives you new tools and techniques and materials to make your idea, the idea that you have in your head, come to life. That's thumbnail. The real important thing, though, in the makerspace, more than the equipment, is the community that you bring together of people who are inventors, thinkers, willing to try new ideas and that kind of thing. So do you have any space, virtual or real, that can accommodate such a concept?
Yeah, I mean, so my response is that we always look at these models and take a big step, not a big step, we take a step back, especially because of my partner and all the artists we deal with are Lakota or Native. And it's like, how do you create that, but make it more based in Lakota culture? And of course, I'm not the one to make that decision. But what we realized is that our role at Racing Magpie is to be a little more, not more strategic, but more focused. So this idea of, okay, we knew there needed to be some hand tools. We have people who love doing, we have the resources of the artists in their studios who are really open to having those conversations with people. But as we think about, we have one building right now that's 3,600 square feet that's been renovated and we're using it. We have a second building that's even bigger. It's 5,300 square feet. And I keep saying we have about 30 ideas and we can only fit about 6 of them into this building. But one of those that fits what you're talking about is this idea of like a community or collective print studio, where we have, if we're starting to plan, well, if we could have a letterpress and a screen printing space and a etching press that are very expensive. We have the artists who know how to use those and who want to give back to community. So if we could create some space where those big items are there, big equipment are there, and we have the artists who want to teach, we can then create a space that's in the spirit of a maker space, but it's very much focused on printmaking. And then if we can do that, maybe we could have another room that's set up, like you mentioned earlier, Lawrence, like this idea of some recording equipment, and the artists who know how to do that. We're trying to think of it a little more modular, and everything we do is based on the feedback from the artists. So we're always following their lead as well.
Right.
And that printmaking studio was one. We didn't see much. We started doing kind of a makerspace in the first year or so downtown, and we just didn't see it getting used much. And we realized that maybe that's not our place, is not like a generic makerspace, but much more focused and having more focused spaces.
Right. Well, I think, in the prison, one of the ways we deal with that, because we certainly don't have a makerspace, but one of the ways we do that is we bring all of the artists together from time to time, and they share their techniques and materials. They talk about, how they are, let's say, making do with what they have. For example, some artists don't have access to paper, they don't have funds or whatever. And one guy he figured out a way to take the brown paper bags, which were being just thrown away, and some crayons, and he's making fantastic art out of that. And then when the other guys saw what he was doing, that gave them ideas, and now they're taking spin-offs on the way that he was using the materials, and other guys do similar kinds of things. So as I mentioned before, even though people focus on the equipment, the real value of an art of a makerspace is that you have people who are in those modular things, but they come together from time to time, whether just by osmosis or what are actual formal presentations, to share tools and techniques. So different people might find a kind of bead that nobody was using before. And, if you go back to beads before Europeans, I don't think they had many glass beads in the America. People weren't doing glass beads. In fact, they weren't doing them in very many places at all. But now it's almost, you can say, traditional in terms of how much people use them. So bringing those things together, creating this space where culture can live, i.e. grow, adapt, look at its surroundings and adjust to the surroundings. That's what cultures do. Then it just seems like you guys are in a very good position to enhance that.
I hope we are. And I definitely see little ways that artists are influencing each other and impacting each other. And so far, they've all been positive. I was just thinking this summer, we helped navigate to bring a student from the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, who was originally from Siston, or he's an enrolled member up there. It brought him as a student into Rapid City to do a mentorship with John Gozen Center, who's a silver worker and a jeweler. And of course, that 6 weeks he spent with John was probably incredible for him. He created a beautiful hand engraved Dakota floral silver bracelet. But then I also heard John, the elder artist, saying, man, it was great to see that happen. I've never wanted to do Dakota because I'm Lakota. But just to be able to support him in doing that work, he was actually thinking about making some adjustments to his creative process too. And those are those situations that our space hopefully can continue to foster.
Excellent. If we, in the next few minutes, could you say a little bit about the community garden that you guys are working on?
I think we're on the same wavelength here. Yeah, so the one of these opportunities that has come up based on relationship was, we have two buildings that are next to each other with some green space in the middle, which we didn't have downtown, and we didn't know what to do with it. But we had the Lakota Sewing Circle said, would you ever consider a garden? And I said, yeah, we would, but wood's expensive, right? To build raised beds or anything like that. And then we just happened to talk to this group called Makoche Agricultural Development, which is a new nonprofit based on Pine Ridge. And they said, well, hey, we got a grant and we have some money in here to support someone creating a community garden. So in May 1st, we found out we needed to do that by May 31st. I have the money spent. But it's not finished yet. We did go through a community design project. I'm going to share with you an image of, this is an overhead view of our buildings. This is our building that we renovated, and we have our gallery and everything in. And this building over here is on the right is our building for future expansion. But this design was designed by about 10 community members who have some background in traditional plant knowledge. I even got a local landscape architect who's in the arts to just help us draw this drawing, but we created this drawing to say, let's put a path in around, let's put in some traditional, let's move some buffalo berries and chokecherry bushes in, let's create a raised bed, some seating, and some pollinator beds, nothing super fancy, but really just coming from the heart and a good place to be. And let's see if I can get this to change. We did some work, and there's you can see we dug out the bed path. We built this really cool shaped raised bed that straight from Menards, pre-done plans, and we've gotten it filled. We put some little planters out front. There it is with the path in and some seats that we build ourselves out of cedar. And eventually we'll have another beautiful mural up here on the wall right behind the seating. So this is a community-based project that we never thought we'd get into, but it's going to continue to build the space that feels good, that connects us to the earth, that connects us to place. That's a place for generational transfer of knowledge, right? The elders can come and teach different people about some of the traditional plants and all of these things. So
Okay.
I need to get a more updated picture, but we did plant some plants in there 3 weeks ago, and I just need to get some better photos. But we've got tomatoes are going well and strawberries are going well. And
Okay.
yeah, that's it.
We're at the end of our time, so I'd like to thank you for sharing it. I hope we can come back and take a look at what you guys are doing again sometime in the near future. In the meantime, thanks to everybody for showing up and being a part of this exchange, and join us next week. Thank you and goodbye.